The first reactions to Marvel's Fantastic Four First Steps are now out, and they're calling it a masterpiece and one of the best Marvel movies ever made. Have Disney and Marvel really turned the tide just in time for Avengers Doomsday? Or will the general audience, yet again, disagree with the opinions of the carefully selected, curated and especially invited advance reviewers? Let's go through the first reactions grift. Industry Trade Variety writes, Fantastic Four First Reactions say film is one of the best things Marvel has ever made, with stunning visuals and excellent performances from leading cast. That sounds pretty impressive, doesn't it? But let's read on. Marvel's The Fantastic Four First Steps has been unveiled to members of the film press, and first reactions are praising the MCU epic as a visual feast with snappy, confident storytelling. That's another way of saying some select of us members of the entertainment media complex that exist in symbiosis with Disney were especially invited to see Fantastic Four. Being predisposed to liking the movie or having a working relationship with Disney, or at the very least not being overtly critical of them in the past, was a prerequisite for being invited. Because that is the key here, as well as the grift. These aren't early fan screenings that everyone can attend, like Superman had in the days prior to its release, which gave a wave of mixed to mostly positive reviews, countering the one incredibly negative critic review that broke the embargo the week prior. And that could only happen because Warner invited all critics to their advance screenings, even the ones that had no, shall we say, incentive to give the movie a positive review. The contrast between that and what Disney are doing here could not be greater, because being more likely than not to give a positive review, for whatever reason, is a prerequisite for being on Disney's guest list. And Disney in particular are notorious at this. They're not the only ones doing it, of course, but they are the only ones taking it to a ridiculous extreme. Let's look at an example in Snow White. Obviously, the audience, certainly in our sphere of the internet, hate the live-action Snow White remake, and even the critics in general didn't like it. Which is why it has a 39% rotten score with all critics, and it fared even worse with top critics, who saw it as even more rotten, giving it a mere 28%. The critics that were hand-picked to attend Disney's initial critic screening of Snow White were of a different ilk though, with Variety then writing, Snow White First Reactions praise film as a visual feast and one of Disney's best live-action remakes in years. And it wasn't just Variety, all such write-ups were like that, because Disney had obedient flying monkeys doing the actual reviews. Case in point, The Hollywood Reporter wrote, Snow White First Reactions praise remake, a big surprise, Rachel Zegler stuns, with the byline, Disney held the LA premiere of its live-action reboot starring Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot on Saturday, and early reactions to the film say it is far better than anticipated, CGI dwarfs aside. That, of course, is the reaction you get when you exclusively invite friendly press, yet even they couldn't bring themselves to praise the CGI abominations. Still, based on this early reaction, you'd think the movie was a masterpiece and a modern-day classic, but nope. A mere 28% of top critics liked it, meaning 72% didn't, something you'd never guess from the early reaction and the headlines derived from that, and that indeed is the game. Curate artificially positive reviews that'll bamboozle the audience into forking over their cash before they realize they were bamboozled, at which point, it's too late. The cash has been forked over. Do you like the breakdown you're getting here? If so, why not like this video? Share it with someone else who needs this breakdown, and if you're new, please subscribe and stick around. Snow White, of course, wasn't a fluke. It was par for the course for Disney. They do the same thing with all their big movies, which is why, for a while, every new Marvel movie was the best Marvel movie since the previous Marvel movie, until it could no longer be denied that the previous Marvel movie had failed massively with the audience, at which point every new Marvel movie became the best Marvel movie since Endgame, and the movie which turned the tide. Like, look at the abominable Captain America Brave New World. The Hollywood Reporter summarized the early reviews from the carefully curated and especially invited critics in their headline: Captain America Brave New World First Reactions After Premiere. A thrill ride from start to finish. Of course, that movie was so shockingly bad that some of the critics could not praise it quite as much as Disney would have wanted. They do, after all, hope to maintain some level of credibility with the readers afterwards. Hence, Variety's write-up read, Captain America Brave New World draws mixed first reactions, some praising it as an absolute blast, and others saying it's slightly empty. Of course, when the critics beyond those especially invited to Disney's carefully curated screening saw the movie, the response was no longer mixed. It was near universally negative, with all critics labeling it rotten at 46% and top critics labeling it even rottener at 34%. And obviously, the audience, for the most part, hated that movie. I could go on and revisit earlier reviews of every single major Disney movie of the recent past, because the pattern is always the same. The highly curated first wave response is very positive, but then later it turns out that the general response at best is significantly less positive, as was the case with Thunderbolts, yet more often than not, the general response is mixed to negative, or even quite negative. I see no reason to doubt that that pattern will repeat itself with Fantastic Four First Steps. Now that we've established that the first reaction to Disney movies in particular is highly curated and, in a sense, gamed, let's look at the reaction to Fantastic Four again. Variety writes, Fantastic Four First Reactions say film is one of the best things Marvel has ever made, with stunning visuals and excellent performances from lead cast. Taking a deeper dive into the article this time, it reads, Next Best Picture Editor-in-Chief Chief Neglia wrote on X that the Marvel tentpole lives up to its namesake of fantastic, hailing the film's excellent leading quartet and delightful retro-futuristic aesthetic. He wrote, combined with Matt Shakman's snappy, confident storytelling, this is an intriguing and satisfying first step for Marvel's new team. Easily the best depiction of this quartet on screen to date, as the MCU continues to regain control of the ship and steer it closer to Doomsday. See, that's an important narrative here. Yeah, it can no longer be denied that Marvel has sucked to high heavens, ever since all checks and balances were removed, and Kevin Feige got all power to do what he wanted and go all in on DEI. But now, Marvel are back, girl-bossing their way to Doomsday, which all you sheeple out there better get excited for. Expect some variation of that narrative to be the recurring theme in the upcoming reviews. Marvel is back, so get excited for Doomsday. But are they though? And should you be? Is Fantastic Four really that good? Or is it that bad? I haven't seen the movie yet and cannot say either way. What I can say though is that based on past examples, only some of which we went through here, but there are plenty others. At best, the movie might be alright, but not as good as these early reviews would have you believe, and at worst, it's another disaster. The general consensus is going to be somewhere between those two extremes, but we don't know exactly where until more critics, let alone actual audiences, see the movie and we get that consensus. What do you think the consensus eventually is going to be? Let us know in the comments, and if you thought the information in this video was enlightening, then please give it a like, and help share it in your socials, so your friends who still fall for Disney's game also learn how it's played. Finally, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe and indicate you want notifications on all videos.